Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this first Committee of Strategic and Technical Planning for 2025. We welcome our officers presenting today, all elected members of the committee and members of the public who will be making representations, and elected members but not part of this committee. Do we have any apologies?
We've received apologies for absence from Councillors David Took and Pete Roper. And just as an update as well, Councillor Belinda Borden is attending remotely.
That's great, thank you. So for the benefit of the public attending today or watching on live stream, I'm Councillor Sari House, Chair of this committee, and my Vice Chair is Councillor Bolwell. This meeting is being live streamed and will be available to view on the Council website after the meeting. By attending this meeting, you consent to being filmed. Can I remind everybody that when you are speaking, please speak directly into the microphones so that you can be clearly heard and seen. This planning committee is not a public meeting, but a meeting held in public, and the public are invited to it. All attendees must comply with the ruling of the chair. They must not interrupt the meeting or cause undue disturbance. And to support this, please switch off your mobile phones or select silent mode for the duration of the meeting. And those using Teams, please ensure microphones are on mute and your device volume is set to 0 to maintain audio quality. Only those who have registered to speak in accordance with the speaking protocol will be invited to address the committee for a maximum of 3 minutes. No material is to be circulated to members of the committee, and we have 2 applications to determine today. The case officer will be invited to present the report and recommendations. Next, I will invite members of the public who have registered to speak to address the committee in the following order: public against, public support, applicant, agent, town parish, council and ward members. Each of you will have 3 minutes. You'll be given a heads up at 2 minutes 30 seconds by the Vice Chair. Following public speaking, the planning officers will have the opportunity to address any salient points they wish to clarify, and committee members will be given the opportunity to ask questions of the planning officers before moving on to debate. When we go into councillor questions and debate, for the benefit of the public watching, can the members state their name and ward when addressing the meeting? So, for the first item, I'll be supported by Lara Altree, Senior Lawyer, Regulatory, here, and my Vice Chair, Dave Bolwell. So just before we get into introducing officers, can we approve the minutes of the last meeting, please? That was the 26th of November. Are we content, members? Yes. Thank you. I'll sign those at the end of the meeting. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Members of the public, you have the opportunity to make your representation ahead of the item that you've come to speak about, or you can wait until after the officer report. I believe the item that you're going to talk about is the second item on the agenda today. Excellent. So, Tony, can you just introduce yourself to the meeting for the audio, please, and then feel free to proceed with your presentation.
Excellent. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name is Tony Cosgrove. I'm a planning officer with Dorset Council. I'm a specialist waste and minerals planning officer, and I'm here to talk about a modest amend to the Blandford Waste Management Centre, which many of you will know is set for commencement in the next few months. I do have some slides, which I'm just going to use just to give us some kind of context to what I'm talking about. And I'm just going to get those up now so colleagues here can see them. Hopefully they should be appearing on the screen in the room. There we go. So the new Waste Management Centre at Blandford has been built because it's difficult for some residents to use existing facilities, and it doesn't meet the modern demands that our residents need in terms of recycling. Planning has been granted for the new site. Works are due to commence in 2025. This is a major development with significant both financial investment and officer time. We need to come to you today to ask for a minor but important amend to a condition that would allow that project to progress. As Dorset Council is the applicant, we cannot discharge it at officer level. I will say that if the applicant was anybody other than the council, it's highly likely that we would have discharged this at officer level, but it's really important for transparency that we come along today to talk to you about that. I'll just give you a bit of context. Many of you will know where it is, but it's always nice just to set the scene. It's just off the A350 here. It's the site marked red. It's just south of the Sunrise Business Park. Many of you will know it because it's just opposite Lidl, which is an important local landmark. It's a greenfield site, and you can see that the plan is to access it via a left turn off the A350 ring road there. What's it going to look like? It already has an extant planning permission, so we're pretty clear on what it's going to look like. That's the left turn I was talking about there, where it says site access in the bottom right. It's well screened, and it's a very interesting site. There's a great big barn there for recycling, and residents will be able to come across to the area marked 3 to do their household recycling. So what's happening on the site at the minute is that we have got some important archaeological works going on. A number of interesting finds have been found. Not all of the site has got anything interesting for archaeology, so only some parts. There's various remains being found, some interesting pottery, which you might be able to see there on the photograph, and some interesting evidence of dwelling and how people have been using this land literally for thousands of years. The reason the archaeological works is going on is it is a condition on the current planning permission, which is condition 3, which says prior to commencement of the development, a programme of archaeological work shall be completed in accordance with the submitted scheme. Completed there is my emphasis that I've put on this, just to remind us that we cannot really go ahead with anything until all the archaeological works have been completed as things stand. Notwithstanding the fact that a lot of areas are not going to have any archaeological work done to them at all. The access roads, the ditches, there's not any archaeology there. And many areas already have the archaeology complete, and the archaeologists have moved through the site and in effect have handed it over to us to begin the development. But because of the way the development is worded, or the condition is worded, we can't go ahead at the minute until it is completed. And we would like to change that. We would like to revise the condition to say that prior to commencement of the development, an archaeological plan shall be produced in accordance with various good practice. That would still cover site preparation, recording, fines management, monitoring, how any fines on site will be managed into the future. I think it's important to say that the essence of this is to facilitate development in areas where no archaeological works are ever planned, and in areas where archaeological works have already been completed and the county archaeologist is content that work can commence there. For the rest of the site, the archaeological works will just progress as they currently are anyway. We have, as you would expect, spoken to the county archaeologist and asked for his thoughts, who is Steve Wallace. He has given us a written response, and I've also spoken to him as well over the phone. And you can see here what our archaeologist's views are, that it's entirely reasonable. The archaeologists are currently working their way through the site from the southeast to the northwest, and the land behind them is content for them to continue the works on. Clearly, if they find anything, they can ring fence it and no work can go there. But as things stand, it seems to be working quite well and there's no problems. So in summary, that's what we would like to do. We would like to make this minor amendment to condition 3, which is archaeology, which in effect would allow works to commence on areas where there is no archaeological interest or where the archaeological interest has been discharged, and everything else would remain unchanged as it is.
Thank you, Tony. There are no public speakers registered for this item, so we can move straight into any technical questions that members may have for the officer. David Taylor, Charminster St Mary's.
Thank you, Chair. David Taylor, Charminster St Mary Ward, Dorset Council, and also a member of this team. My question is the fact is that specifically of the area you're looking forward to release to start the building work in, can we put this as a form of a forward action to say that it can actually go forward? Can we actually do that to make sure that we can actually give the application to the building to start going ahead?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the purpose of the question. Apologies.
You're looking forward to going forward with building straight away, but the thing is that the archaeological dig is expected to last the entire course. It's well past the start date of your build, which is what I'm trying to get forward for you to do, is to say, what sort of area would you like to be released so that you could go forward with building straight away? That's the question.
Thank you, I understand now. So I think it's fair to say that it isn't a fixed area. The area that will be released is down to the archaeologists who are currently on site, who in effect would split the land into kind of one of three categories. One category is that there is no archaeological interest there. There is no plan to do any archaeology there. The archaeologists will never touch it, and that area is marked out. The second area is the area that the archaeologists have moved through, have finished their work, and say our work now is complete. We have got no more plans for this area, but we have finished our archaeology. And then the third area is this is the place that we intend to go to next to do our archaeological works. So this condition would in effect allow development to begin in areas 1 and 2, and 3 would remain unchanged. Fantastic, thank you, that's wonderful.
Councillor Northam, sorry.
Just a question about, thank you for introducing it, and the reason you gave that this has come to our committee is that Dorset Council are the owner. When I look on page 23, it says something different in the report that's come to the councillors, unless I'm misreading it. It says under para 134 states that any application, and then there's two clauses, neither of which says because it's owned by Dorset Council. Says that it's come to this committee.
Sorry, Chair, that's my fault.
Apologies, I'll try and get in sync.
We are the applicant, and if that's not recorded in the document, I can make that amendment.
Are there any further technical questions? Yes, Councillor Borden.
Belinda Rideout, Gillingham Ward. It's not really a technical question, Chairman. I just wanted to ask, where are the results of the archaeological dig published? Where can we see them, out of interest?
We will be able to see them. That is part of the plan, and they will be recorded technically in an archaeological document, but there is also a plan to have stakeholder engagement around this to make it accessible to the public. And as an aside, we had a conversation on Friday about ensuring that there is some local publicity on site so that people who use the site will be aware of its previous use and how that previous use has changed over time. So I think there's three elements to that. There'll be the technical document for kind of maybe fellow archaeologists to understand what's there. There'll be something for the wider public to access. And then the third thing will be people who use the site will also be able to kind of access something, probably an information board or something like that to show what was on site. Can I just say one final thing, which is Councillor Rideout very kindly pointed out an error in the opening of the document which said that the planning application was issued in 2021. It was actually received. So I think we should change that one word as well. So thank you to the councillor for pointing that out to me.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Does that conclude our technical questions? Okay, so I open it to debate now. Councillor Flower.
I'll make it easy, Mr. Chairman. Move the recommendation as set out in the report.
Okay, so we've a proposal and a second. Are we content to take that to vote with a simple show of hands? So unanimous vote, so that's application PVOC 2024-07289, land southeast of Sunrise Business Park and north of the A350 Blandford Bypass, Blandford Forum is resolved. Thank you very much for that presentation, Tony. And now I say goodbye to one lawyer, parting is such sweet sorrow, and welcome to another. He's here. Maybe a couple of minutes. So can I suggest we adjourn for a few moments until we're joined by Philip Crowther, Senior Lawyer Regulatory. So thank you very much. We are now joined by Philip Crowther, Senior Lawyer Regulatory, here on my right. And for the benefit of public watching, I'm also supported by my Vice Chair, Councillor Bolwell, on my left. So this is to consider application P full 2024-04447. This is land north of Ewelease Spinney, Chickerell. I will just ask those wishing to speak. Do you wish to speak after the officer presentation or before? That's fine, after. Thank you very much. So, without any further ado, Matthew, could you please introduce yourself and who's supporting you and proceed with your presentation?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Good morning, members of the public. My name is Matthew Purgeon-Hawkes. I'm a lead project officer here at Dorset Council. I'll be presenting this application. I'm joined by Anne Collins, the area manager here. Okay, so this is an application for a battery energy storage system. I'll just arrange my laptop screen here a moment. The applicant is Weymouth Battery Limited, and the application follows refuse of a similar application back in March 2024, which was submitted by a different applicant, Energy 23. Now, just before I get into the presentation proper, I will just flag some of the updates in the update sheet. These are listed on screen now. We've got the revised drawings, which pick up a minor change to the customer substation building within the site. The applicant has submitted a briefing note to all members of the Strategic Planning Committee, and that's covered in the update sheet as well. We have also had four additional representations from one from a councillor from Chickerell Town Council and 3 from members of the public. 3 of those comments are summarised in the update note. The 4th one from Miss Jones isn't, because that came in later on Friday. In summary, that response raises concerns around highways, fire risk, proximity of the development to homes, fear from fire risk, and harm to the village of Chickerell. So I just want to flag those comments. The comment has been published online for transparency as well, but that's just my verbal response to that comment. And then we also have updates to some of the conditions as well. Conditions 2 to refer to the latest drawings, condition 7, which is again referring to the latest drawing, and condition 9 there, which is about the timing for the access routes coming in there and the details of that as part of the landscape scheme. So getting into the presentation, where is this site? It's south of Cold Harbour. Cold Harbour Road is here, and it's between South Hill and Chickerell, just north of the Chickerell substation. The site includes the main access from Cold Harbour. This is the only access into the site from the main road, and that leads down south to the site, and there are 2 options here to go east around this access track to the site itself, or south and then east to the site itself. And this access track serves a number of agricultural plots in this area. And just to point out, the closest residential property is about 350 metres to the east, Grafton Avenue, and the site is currently used for horse grazing. I've tried to do a bit of an overlay here to show what's going on in the surrounding area. Members may be aware of the 400 megawatt BESS application by Stratera. The committee resolved to approve that back in July. That is shown in red outline here to the west of the site, which I've just crudely put in yellow. And then there is also, referred to in the committee report as well, the development to the east of Chickerell. That is a live planning application a hybrid application for full and outline permission to the east of Chickerell. It remains undetermined, and I think the closest properties there are around 400 metres from the site, so slightly further than Grafton Avenue over here. And for context as well, just going to show the proposed plans for the Statira BES, and just to note that would include the site with the application we're talking about today would use the same access road from Cold Harbour here, and the closest existing dwellings to the Statira development were on Cold Harbour, about 100 metres away from their northwest corner of the site. This is the southern part of the Statira site. Obviously, it's a lot larger than the site we're talking about today. But just to note, the southwest corner of the site here was about 50 metres from the proposed dwellings as part of the East Chickerell extension there. And that application remains undetermined because of the Section 106, but that's expected to be issued imminently. So coming onto the site, these are the designations in and around the red line of the application site. So it's outside of the defined development boundary. It falls within an area of land of local landscape importance, which is designated in the Chickerell Neighbourhood Plan. There's a right of way which runs along the south side of the site and connects South Hill and Chickerell. It runs along here east to west, and it goes just north of the Chickerell substation before coming out at Chickerell. There are overhead power lines here from National Grid which link with the Chickerell substation. The site access is in flood zone 1, apart from a small section of the route here which suffers from medium and high surface water flooding. And the site is within a mineral safeguarding area as well. This is an extract from the Chickerell Neighbourhood Plan. It shows the designated land of local landscape importance here in hash, so it's a much larger designation, which includes much of the area between South Hill and Chickerell and land surrounding the Chickerell substation here. And I've just marked the site in red here. And this is protected under policy CNP 10 of the Chickerell Neighbourhood Plan. And point out the north-south corridor as well. This is a corridor for birds, and it links with Radipole Lake. So looking at some site photos, I'm just going to start from the north, from Cold Harbour, and then take a kind of walk into the site. So this is the access from Cold Harbour. It's the only access from a main road into the site. As you walk down, you can see the route in here. And as you get kind of down, as you approach the site from the west, you can see the pylons here in the surrounding landscape, and also some of the existing agricultural barns within the landscape as well. So these photos here, 4 to 6, these show the kind of eastern boundary of the site. The site's just a bit further alongside that hedge and tree boundary, and you can see here that it is quite well screened at the moment, and you have got the pylons which cross the site, cross the wider area as well. These photos show the site itself. Photo 1 here is stood in the northwest corner of the site, looking south, and you can see Edward Spinney Woods there, which is the boundary where the footpath is. On that boundary there, and you can see here again on the western boundary of the site, you've got those trees and hedges which provide quite a decent screening to the site, and you've got the pylons in the distance. You've got a view here northwest to southeast across the site, and then as you walk up the access track, this is walking further east away from the site. You look back to it and you can see again that band of trees and the pylons cutting across the site. And again, turning further southwest, you can see the pylons, and you can see the edge where the footpath runs across that site, and you get a corner glimpse of this barn as well. So one of the things that has changed from the scheme that was refused in in March 2024 is that the site boundary has been amended to include a second access from this access road, and this is where the access would be next to a existing barn, and it would across this adjacent field to the BES compound site. These photos are taken from the public right-of-way, looking up toward the site. Note the barn in the northeast corner here, where the second access would come across and the primary access would be from the north. As you can see, you've got hedge boundaries along the west and to the north, and it's generally quite well self-contained. And that bottom photo there is a view along the public right-of-way itself. These photos taken on a sunnier day are from the public right-of-way slightly further east as you kind of approach the site from the west. As you leave South Hill and walk across from Grafton Avenue, you come out to this location where you look towards the site. So just before getting into what's been submitted with this application, I think it's just important to recap on the refuse scheme. So this is the scheme that was refused back in March, and this is the site plan. And just to note, the compared to what is now proposed, there are a number of differences. That in this refuse scheme, there were pairs of battery containers with their own transformers. They were Tesla Megapack batteries. The proximity of the water tanks to the BES compound was much closer, and there was only one access to the site from the north. That application was refused on fire safety and contamination grounds against the officer's recommendation to approve. And these are the reasons. I will just read those because they're helpful just to have in mind as we get into the questions and debate as well. But yeah, the first reason was for having regard to the provision of a single vehicular access point to the site, lack of vehicular passing places, the layout of the site, and the lack of provision of sufficient water supply, drenches and inlets for the fire service. It is considered that the proposed development cannot demonstrate that it will be safe for the lifetime of the development, having regard to the fire risk and the proximity to residential development. Therefore, it would not comply with the guidance from the National Fire Chiefs Council, NFCC, on grid-scale battery energy storage system planning, the NPPF, those specific powers, policy ENV 16 of the local plan. And then the second reason for refusal, that was about the contamination and having regard to the potential risk for fire, and that in the event of defensive fire tackling measures would be taken, this would result in discharge of significant volumes of water that would likely be contaminated to the detriment of groundwater and the natural environment, contrary to policy ENV 9 of the local plan and the NPPF, powers 180 and 191. And the applicants clearly tried to address those reasons for refusal, and there was a pause before they resubmitted the current application we've got now. This is the proposed site plan, and whereas the previous development was a 60 megawatt scheme, that is slightly lower power at 50 megawatt here. As you can see, there are a lot of similarities. There would still be a square leveled BES compound, battery energy storage system compound. The arrangement of the battery containers within the site would be different. There are now 6 quads of battery containers, so there'd be four units together separated by a firewall. The battery supplier is different. It's CATL Energex batteries compared to Tesla Megapack batteries, and there's some operational reasons for that, but they also have a higher testing to a UL standard. Most of the equipment within the site is around 3.5 meters tall. There's a fence around the site, acoustic fence, which would be 4 meters tall. And you've got your water tanks here, which are to the north of the site, further from the BES compound in the refuse scheme. And the orange line here, that shows the indicative connection route to the Chickwell substation. The remainder of the site is landscape with trees and shrubs, and I'll just come on to that landscaping here. This is a landscaping plan, so you've got the applicants proposed a wildflower mix, wrapping more kind of closely around the northern, western and southern part of the site. There'd be a woodland planting along a thin woodland planting along the eastern boundary and along the southern boundary where this existing footpath runs. And then there'd be some scrub planting as well within the site, in this part of the site. And at the moment it is, it's used as a paddock, so it's just a grass field. These are the section through the site, and that's the customer substation building, which I was talking about, the design being tweaked slightly, but essentially the site is enclosed with the 4 metre acoustic fence around the outside, and then you've got these quads of batteries and the transformers in the middle. Unlike the previously refused scheme, there are fire barriers between these BESS containers, and there's also fire barriers to the transformers as well, which separate those the infrastructure out within the site. This is the proposed water tank. There are 5 proposed in the northern part of the site, right next to the road. They measure 2.1 metres high and 5 metres wide, have capacity for 50,000 litres of water each, totaling 250,000 litres, and that is what the NFCC requires as their minimum requirement. This is the drainage within the site. The drainage plan has been reviewed by the council's flood risk management team and the Environment Agency. It would deal with both normal surface water flooding within the site and then also contaminated surface water if there was a fire. Obviously, BESs aren't designed for a fire to happen, but that is an inherent risk of these types of development. The Environment Agency has no objection subject to conditions, and effectively what the drainage layout would do, in the event of a fire, there would be a toggle block valve which would activate, and that would divert all water into a storage tank where it could then be collected and treated. The capacity of that is 300,000 litres, so 50,000 litres more than what's in the water storage tanks. Access to the site, the applicants provide a series of tracking different vehicles entering the site from both of these accesses, set out in the transport assessment. And this shows the swept path analysis of a crane during the construction period, shows that can get sufficient access into the site. Again, same situation for HGVs. The access, this was obviously a reason for refusal without there not being sufficient passing places with the previous scheme. So the applicant has looked at that in detail, and they've looked at the route around the kind of northeastern arm of the access and then the southern arm as well. And there are a number of passing places around the site. You can see that on both routes through. So there is sufficient place for fire engines to pass one another. In terms of renewable energy and the low carbon benefits, it's out in the report, in section 15 there, about BESs providing a balancing function for the grid and how they're considered essential to decarbonise the grid, move away from fossil fuels and move towards net zero. There's been a kind of recent push with the government, DESNZ, and their promotion of net zero and how to get there. The BES would be a 50 megawatt facility, and the battery storage life would be 2 hours. So discharging twice a day, that produces 200 megawatt hours per day. That's the assumed discharge of electricity, and that would be enough based on average electricity needs to supply around 19,500 households in Dorset. Obviously, we don't know where the electricity would be going, but that's just for illustrative purposes there. And that equates to around 11.5% of households in Dorset, to put those kind of carbon benefits and electricity benefits into perspective. Fire risk. Fire risk is the main cause for objection as set out in the report. The objections are wide-ranging on fire safety matters and focus on the lithium batteries, the potential for thermal runaway, and impacts on the local community and the local environment. So how are local authorities meant to consider safety? Well, the National Planning Practice Guidance tells us that when planning applications for development of battery storage systems of 1 megawatt hour and over are submitted, the planning authority are encouraged to consult with the local fire and rescue service. That's what Dorset Council does. The fire and rescue service is a statutory consultee on all BES applications, and they've been consulted a couple of times on this application. And the reason why the planning practice guidance says to do that is to get their views and to identify potential mitigations that could be put in place in the event of an incident, and so that these views can be taken into account when determining an application. Local planning authorities are also encouraged to consider guidance produced by the NFCC as well, which we have. That's considered in the report. The NFCC has current guidance, which is from 2023. They also last year issued draft guidance for consultation. And to be clear, the current scheme has been considered under the current guidance rather than the emerging guidance, because we don't quite know what it's going to say, and it'd be premature to assess it on that basis. And this is the current NFCC guidance. It sets out guidance on a number of matters relevant to planning, the spacing of the BES units being 6 metres separation before mitigation, separation from nearby uses being an initial minimum of 25 metres. Here we're about 350 metres from the nearest residential property. Restrictions on planting, no combustible vegetation within 10 metres of containers. Emergency access, it sets a minimum 2 to account for wind speed and wind direction. And water supply as well, it talks about needing a minimum to deliver no less than 1,900 litres per minute for at least 2 hours, which equates to 228,000 litres. I think earlier on in my presentation I said the water tanks met the minimum. They do exceed the minimum slightly. So the fire chief guidance asks for 228,000 litres and the tanks store 250,000 litres. The guidance also goes into detail on battery chemistry, safety features testing, fire detection and monitoring and venting as well. And it also cross-refers to other guidance, NFPA 855, which the fire service has also considered as well. So this development, it was originally submitted. The applicant didn't specify the battery type that would be proposed. During the course of determination, the applicant confirmed that. The benefit of that is that it does provide some certainty about what is proposed, and there are a number of features here which help to reduce the fire risk. So in terms of measures that reduce the risk of thermal runaway occurring, each BES container would have detectors to detect early signs of a fire. You'll see that in the applicant's note to members as well. They provided links to various videos and the features that would be in there. Each BES container would have a battery safety management system as well, which would give information on energy capacity, thermal status, detection systems, so that can be monitored and controlled. There's thermal management systems as well to keep the batteries cool and to try and prevent them overheating. So they're the kind of preventative measures. You've got then also mitigative measures within the BES as well. So they are each BES container having its own detection system for fires. Each BES having a static suppression system. So what that is, and the applicant has explained it within their note, is it's a condensed aerosol system which identifies whether a fire has started within a BES container, and it will essentially spray a condensed aerosol system within the unit to try and prevent that fire spreading. And what the applicant set out is that system is better than drenchers that would be kind of used on units, and the fire brigade have mentioned that within their guidance as well. The separation distances are relevant to mitigation as well. There are the BES containers are arranged in quads. Each quad is 5.9 metres away from one another. In the refuse scheme, the BES pairs were 2.5 metres apart, so it's more than double what was previously proposed. There are the 4-hour fire barriers within the site as well. They're new features that have come in since the refuse scheme, and they are between the BES containers within a quad, and then also either side of the transformers within the site. We have the water tanks, which I've spoken about, and the emergency services information point, which would be secured by condition. Because there's this, you've got the one access in from Cold Harbour, and then the road diverts. There's a condition that requires the information points to be provided, and it's expected that it would be provided in that location so that firefighters could gather information about the site and consider the best way to approach if needed. And there are also access and passing places to enter the site as well. In terms of flammable gas build-up, there's the gas detection, and there's a ventilation system as well to try and prevent gas build-up. And other safety features include fencing around the site for trespassers, also doubles as a noise barrier. And you've got thermal imaging cameras around the site as well in the corners and along in the centre of each fence. And we have the fire surface runoff measures as well, which I've explained. So there's a lot in here which is proposed, and the risk of a fire cannot be eliminated, but with these measures it can be reduced. So the key planning issues of this development, they're set out in detail in the report, but I'm just going to talk through them briefly here. So the principle of development. Policy SUS2 identifies renewable energy and utilities infrastructure as acceptable in principle outside of the DDB, which this site is. And policy COM11 relates to the generation of heat and electricity from renewable sources. And that's considered relevant because this development would store and discharge energy from the grid, which could well be a combination of renewable and non-renewable sources. And the policy supports renewables wherever possible, providing that the benefits of the development, such as a contribution towards renewable energy targets, significantly outweigh any harm. And that's what the judgment is made in this case. And it also sets 3 tests in that policy as well about any adverse impacts on the local landscape being satisfactorily assimilated, which this scheme does. The proposal minimising harm to residential amenity through noise, vibration, overshadowing, flicker, and other detrimental emissions, which again this scheme does, and also consideration to the adverse impacts upon designated wildlife sites, nature conservation interests, and biodiversity. This scheme is one that the 10% BNG applies, and it's estimated to achieve 30% biodiversity net gain. You're starting from a relatively low base here because it's a paddock, and there's a lot going into the site in terms of scrub and tree planting, which will increase that value. So the scheme is considered acceptable in principle, and yes, there is a small loss of best and most versatile land, but that's also considered acceptable given the kind of limitations on this site. Landscape and visual impact. The site is relatively well contained. You've got a good boundary there along the western side of the site and to the north. The applicant would be strengthening that through new tree planting along the southern and eastern boundaries where the right of way is. There would be kind of limited impact, but it would be kind of limited and localised to the site. The council's landscape officer has no objection, and the proposal isn't, given it's quite small and self-contained, not judged to have any impact on the Dorset National Landscape, which is located to the north and west of the site, and kind of around 1 kilometre to the west and 3 kilometres to the north. Noise and residential amenity. There aren't considered to be significant adverse impacts from this development on residential amenity. The applicant has done a detailed noise assessment which looks at the impacts on the closest residential dwelling. 350 metres to the east of the site, and the council's environmental health officer has reviewed that. They've concluded that there wouldn't be a significant impact on those on that residential property. And also, just to note, there is with the Stratera development, that was, I think, the closest point from the proposed Persimmon scheme was about 50 metres, and that was concluded to not have a significant adverse impact on those dwellings. So it's concluded here that there isn't that cumulative impact, adverse impact that would be a ground for refusal on this scheme. And just to note, the 4-metre acoustic barrier would be secured by condition. Biodiversity, I've mentioned that the scheme is a BNG scheme. It would achieve 31% biodiversity net gain, which is a significant benefit in the context of the ecological emergency and nature emergency. It's not concluded that it wouldn't harm the north-south wildlife corridor. That's a wildlife corridor for birds, and within the site there would be a biodiversity gain improvement overall. So it wouldn't harm that designated corridor as set out in the Chickwell neighbourhood plan. Highways, there isn't an objection from Highways. They don't consider that the impacts would be severe, and there aren't any highway safety concerns. There are standard conditions on highways, and there are 2 accesses to the BES compound and multiple passing places to get there as well. On health and safety, the scheme has been carefully assessed against the plan of practice guidance and National Fire Chiefs Council guidance. There have been a couple of rounds of consultation where the fire service have been consulted, and there are improvements on the refuse scheme, but then since the application's been submitted as well, there's also been improvements made by the applicant confirming the supplier of the batteries and introducing those fire barriers within the site. Compared to the refuse scheme as well, the distance has been improved quite significantly from 2.5 metres to 5.9 metres between the quads. And importantly, the second access is proposed. I know there's only one access from Cold Harbour, but that access is about 600 metres away. So the reason why there's 2 accesses here is because of wind direction, to give firefighters different options to tackle a fire if they needed to. And what you've got in this proposed scheme is an access on the east if the prevailing wind were to come from the west, or you've got an access from the north in case in case the prevailing wind was from the south, then you could go via the other access. So overall, it's considered acceptable subject to conditions, and there's some quite detailed conditions which I can come on to. On pollution and flood risk and drainage, the EA has no objection. The flood risk management team have no objection, and those matters can be satisfactorily controlled by planning condition. So overall, it is considered the applicant has addressed the reasons for refusal of the scheme from March. There are significant benefits to this scheme, which are considered to outweigh the limited harm to the loss of best and most fertile agricultural land and the landscape and visual harm. The recommendation is to grant, subject to conditions, and those conditions are just on screen now. I've just starred with an asterisk those ones which are tweaked as per the update sheet. So you've got the standard time limit, the approved plans there which pick up the tweak to the customer substation building, the temporary permission, the development being for 40 years, decommissioning happening after that, the construction traffic management plan to manage the construction traffic, construction environmental management plan, the water tanks. That update is there just to refer to the latest drawings require that they are provided. They are provided before BESs are installed on the site, so that they're available and ready to use with right connections that the fire service needs. There's a bed safety management plan there, which the detailed wording asks for all the details for safety management, including the detailed specifications, which the council would consult the fire and rescue service on when those details are submitted. There's hard and soft landscaping condition, tree maintenance replacement, ARB method statement, the biodiversity plan, which would have a post-determination Section 106 agreement. you've got highway and access conditions, highway visibility, gates not opening outwards onto the highway, surface water conditions, the emergency pollution control conditions which have come from the Environment Agency, emergency response plan as well, which would set out the details to be helpful for the fire brigade on how to approach the site, conditions on noise and conditions on external lighting as well. So that concludes my officer presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. So we now move into public representation. We still appear to be one missing. Are you expecting? Sorry? We appear to be one missing. John Fannon. John said, oh, hello. John, do you wish to go first? Because I happen to have you first on my list.
Well, good morning, Chair and members. My name's John Fannon. I'm a nuclear physicist, but my last post with the MOD was Director Large Warships and Auxiliaries. The BESS proposed at Ulay Spinney is arranged in 6 groups of 4 containers. Each group of 4 containers sit back to back with the thermal barrier separating them. There is no test data to confirm that this arrangement is safe. Dorset Fire and Rescue Service states that sufficient testing and evidence must be presented to verify that the fire barrier can meet this requirement. This is not an endorsement of the safety of the site. The standards require real-life testing conducted by an independent test centre, and a computer model will not do. The current test routine has been developed by Underwriters Laboratories, a United States organisation, but Professors Peter Dobson and Peter Edwards of Oxford University have recently found that the test does not actually demonstrate safety over the range of possibilities that can lead to thermal runaway. Recent research work from China supports their view. They are currently advising government that this test is dangerous. The fire at Moorabool, Victoria, Australia required 150 firefighters, and it took 3 days before the stricken containers burned themselves out. That BESS was situated far from any residential area and allowed easy access to firefighting vehicles. The fire at Moss Landing, California, last week, which is the 4th emergency in 4 years, is situated far from anywhere, and mayors in the United States are now conscious of the need to put BESS outside urban limits, and perhaps councils in the UK need to consider that this is important. The applicant maintains that this BESS will support 19,500 Dorset homes. Well, this is nonsense, because the energy from a BESS goes into the national grid. With 28 million homes in the country, with other requirements for electricity, this BESS would supply each household in the UK with about 1.75 watts for about 2 hours, not enough to charge an AA battery. The applicant's emergency plan states that in the event of a fire, a steering committee will be convened within 72 hours. By the time they've got their act together, the fire could be out and toxic smoke all over the area, and it would only remain to get residents in Chickerell and Weymouth to hospital. So with the applicant's ignorance of these batteries, their naive emergency plan, and outstanding questions of safety, please refuse this application. Thank you.
The next speaker on my list is Kay. Kay, you'll have 3 minutes and the Vice Chair will alert you at 2 minutes, 30 seconds.
Thank you. My message to councillors is simple. Don't allow yourselves to be duped into accepting that the secondary site access meets Fire Chief's requirements and mitigates risk. It does neither. Fire Chief guidance requires at least 2 separate access points. Definition of the word separate include unconnected, independent, unattached. In his report, the case officer admits that the secondary eastern access links to and joins the primary route. These words are defined as attached, related, connected, and united. Despite Fire and Rescue Service apparent support, the only conclusion can be that fire chief requirements have not been met. There's only one independent access because the secondary one is reliant on being accessed via the first. Firefighters will have to travel 750 metres in the path of the prevailing wind and through a toxic plume before they can take a right turn onto the site. The applicant states that the prevailing wind is northerly when it is in fact the opposite, and I'm grateful to Weymouth Town Councillors for understanding the gravity of this error. The case officer may argue that this is a safe distance, but real-world examples tell a different story. With shelter-in-place orders 9 kilometres from the Moorabool Bess fire in Australia and a 3-kilometre radius applied at Moss Landing, California. A 3-kilometre shelter-in-place zone locally would affect 26,000 residents, 11 schools, 2 hospitals, 2 GP surgeries, 14 care homes, 7 supermarkets, 8 campsites, farmland to the north and northwest, the police headquarters, and Weymouth Fire Station. It's not the fire itself, but the products of a Bess fire which cause grave concern. I've provided you with a briefing paper on the composition of toxic plumes and associated risks. There is no evidence in the applicant's submission, the Fire and Rescue Service response, or the case officer's report that the implications of a highly toxic plume have been adequately considered. I never imagined I'd be quoting Michael Gove to illustrate an important point. He said, there are sins of omission and sins of commission. There's neglect and a failure to effectively get the system in place, which is one thing. And then there's an active willingness to put people in danger, which is a significantly greater sin. He was, of course, responding to the findings of the Grenfell Tower disaster, but his words are sadly opposite to the debate about Bess, proposed in locations adjacent to large populations, exposing those people to unacceptable risk. I urge you to refuse this application.
Thank you very much, Kay. So that leaves John. Welcome, John. Again, 3 minutes, and you'll hear Dave at 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. Firstly, I would say that our local FRS are not statutory consultees, and as such, they only give guidance. They do not object. So when they say this application design hinders effective firefighting, that should not be downplayed by saying they aren't objecting. It is of concern to the FRS, so it should be of concern to the committee. We all know the propensity for a Bess to catch fire. Should firefighting be hindered by poor application design? That's a question I hope you will discuss. Secondly, I would like to remind the committee that an application for a Bess on this site has already been refused for 2 reasons. The first related to access routes, which I won't go into, as Kay has already pointed out how this renewed application is flawed. The second reason related to the way contaminated water is handled. Contaminated water created by firefighting. Water that may contain hydrofluoric acid, which is used to etch glass and, in science, melt stone. I question what it's going to do to the ACO channel, the plastic in the pipes, and the storage tank this application proposes to employ. 3 minutes speaking time does not allow me to detail how the proposed pollution control method is flawed. But I will say that this application has an identical pollution control system to the one that's been refused and a near identical pre-commencement condition. The wording from both conditions coming from the Environment Agency. With regard to pollution control, the 2 applications are the same. Each planning application has to be determined on its own merits. However, planning precedent and the importance of consistency in decision-making should not be forgotten. As I have said, the last application was rejected because of inferior pollution control, and this application deals with polluted water in an identical way. Previous planning decisions in respect of the same site are material considerations. My understanding is that if you are minded to depart from the previous decision, you are required to explain that departure and provide detailed reasons for your decision. I believe the legal advisor and those here from the Planning Department will be able to clarify and confirm this if it's necessary. I don't think this can be ignored. There are no reasons for such departure in the case officer's report, so it seems the committee needs to discuss this. The previous refusal read, in the event of a fire, defensive fire tackling measures would be taken, resulting in significant volumes of contaminated water being released. Such release would be to the detriment of the aquifers, human drinking water, to groundwater, and to the natural environment. I therefore object to this application as it would be contrary to paragraphs 187 and 198 of the NPPF and policy ENV9 of the local plan. I look forward to hearing your debate, and I urge you to reject this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. So before the officer gets to address any salient points there, we hear from the agent for the applicant, Chris Cox.
Good morning, members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. This proposal represents a significant step forward in addressing previous concerns and delivering a project that prioritises safety, environmental benefits and renewable energy security. From the outset, we have worked closely with Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service, engaging with them twice to ensure that fire safety measures meet and exceed their requirements. Their input has been invaluable in shaping a comprehensive approach to fire prevention, detection and suppression. To address the committee's previous concerns about emergency access, a secondary access route has now been incorporated into the design. This ensures that emergency services will always have rapid and reliable access to the site in any scenario. In terms of fire safety, the proposal incorporates cutting-edge systems, including the Lion Tamer detection system to identify early warning signs of thermal runaway, the StatX suppression system to extinguish fires immediately at their source, and 4-hour fire-rated barriers to prevent the spread of fire to adjacent containers. These systems work together to create one of the most robust fire safety frameworks in the industry. With these measures in place, risk should be put in context. These batteries use similar technology as those which we use in everyday life and which people install in their homes when placing solar panels on their roofs. All statutory bodies, including the Environment Agency, Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue, and public health officers, have raised no objections to the scheme, demonstrating their confidence in its safety and design. Additionally, significant biodiversity enhancements will be delivered, with the proposal achieving a 31% biodiversity net gain, far exceeding standard requirements. In conclusion, this project adopts the most advanced safety systems in Dorset, directly addresses all previously raised concerns, and meets or exceeds all regulatory standards. It supports renewable energy generation and contributes to the UK's energy security, while also delivering environmental benefits to the local area. We are grateful to officers for their thorough report and recommendation to approve the scheme, and we hope the committee will support this recommendation and approve the application today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. We now have Councillor David Palmer from Chickerell Town Council. David, exactly the same. It's 3 minutes and a heads up.
Thank you, Chair. Chickerell Town Council recommends refusal for this planning application, and in our submission to the consultation, it was on the following grounds. The proximity of the proposed site to both an existing urban population and also to a proposed housing development, which, if approved, would deliver up to 393 new houses and land for a primary school adjacent to the proposed storage site. The residents of Chickerell, through their attendance at Town Council meeting and in conversations with councillors, are genuinely concerned as to the fire risk and the potential release of hazardous chemicals from the site. Such an incident would pose significant health risks, not only to Chickerell, but also to adjacent towns and villages. The proposed site falls within the Chickerell Wildlife North-South Corridor, referenced in the Chickerell Neighbourhood Plan 2019 to 2036. The plan was developed in partnership with local residents and states. Development that would significantly detract from the land's function as a wildlife corridor will be resisted. If permitted, the land would no longer fulfil the important ecological function within the neighbourhood plan, which that then seeks to protect. Over 99% of residents who responded to the neighbourhood plan's household questionnaire wanted the land to be protected from development. Chickerell Town Council would also wish to highlight the proximity of the proposed development to the football stadium and the Dorset Police Divisional Headquarters, and we wish to highlight the potential risk in evacuating these sites should this be necessary in response to a major incident at the proposed battery storage site. In conclusion, Chickerell Council believes the committee should both listen to the concerns of its residents and acknowledge the intentions and commitments of its neighbourhood plans, which strives to protect the town for future generations, and in so doing, refuse the application.
Thank you very much, David. Matthew, do you have any salient points that you wish to go back to from any of those speakers?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, speakers. I'll just try and address points in turn. Just starting with John. John spoke about the spacing of containers and the testing of the barrier. There is a condition there which would require the details to be provided and secured by planning condition. There was a comment about the proximity to urban areas and reference about whether because of other fires, that would be extended. What we have to go on is the National Fire Chief Council's guidance, which says 25 metres is an initial minimum. So by those standards, the site is relatively rural. It's 350 metres from the nearest home and 400 metres from those proposed to the east of Chickerell, and that complies with the spacing of the NFCC guidance. There's a comment about the households and sorry if I wasn't clear, but those the scheme providing 11.5% of Dorset households, that's just purely illustrative. The electricity stored and discharged from this site would go back into the grid. That could be used locally, could be used elsewhere. It's just to show what that would look like if it was just used in Dorset. Comments from Kay about the secondary access. Yes, absolutely correct. The site is accessed from one point on Cold Harbour, but then that splits to have two access routes into the BES compound, and that's the important thing on the NFCC guidance. It doesn't go into the kind of, it talks about separate accesses, and this is quite a unusual site in that it's located a long way from the main road, and that split happens about 350 metres away from the site, and that's well beyond what the NFCC say about distances from neighbouring buildings being 25 metres. There hasn't been any plume study undertaken by the applicant. That hasn't been requested by the Fire and Rescue Service or from officers, given the kind of more rural location of this site. There's a comment about the northern prevailing wind. I'm not sure whereabouts that is said by the applicant. I know on their drawings they talk about prevailing wind directions, but with the northern and the eastern access, that would allow, depending on which way the wind's coming from, to approach the fire in a different way. John picked up the comment from the fire brigade about the layout potentially hindering the tackling of tackling a fire, and that's in the committee report. I think there's a kind of catch-22 there. They want to see the fire barrier, but having a fire barrier does also mean that you can't disperse water through it. It also blocks water. So I have spoken with the fire brigade about the layout. We've had a couple of calls on this process, and that's more about the directions they'd approach a blaze from, and that barrier meaning that they can't go at the fire from all angles. There's a comment about the storage tank as well. That's acceptable to the Environment Agency. It is very similar to what was previously refused the officer recommendation at the time was that it was acceptable. The Environment Agency were happy with it. They did look at it very carefully. They have looked at it again on this scheme. They're satisfied that it will be sufficient for its purpose of containing any contaminated water within the site, and for that reason, that's why we've recommended that condition on the conditions there. Councillor David Palmer just noted the proximity from the existing closest dwelling is about 350 metres. It's not adjacent to the proposed eastern extension of Chickwell. It's about 400 metres away. I think that's covered in the report. So it's some distance from that proposed development. And we've also looked at the potential future allocation west of South Hill, but it's not in the local plan. It's very early stages on that, and we can't really give it any weight. The comments around the Chickwell Neighbourhood Plan North-South corridor, we've considered that the site is pretty poorly performing in that function of a north-south corridor. It's just a field paddock at the moment, and what you'd get on the site is scrub planting, tree planting. There would be a hard surface BES compound, but that is considered a benefit to that north-south corridor, and it wouldn't significantly detract from it. You would have that biodiversity net gain. And I get the concerns about the proximity from the police station and the stadium. They are quite a significant distance from this BES development. They're about 2.5 kilometres away. It hasn't come up as a kind of objection in principle to the location of this site. It's more than 25 metres, and that's all I can say on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now move into technical questions, and I've got a small queue to start with. And so we kick off with David Taylor from Charnock St Mary's.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you very much for your presentation as well. I have a number of concerns, which you're probably not surprised, regarding this development. I find it very difficult to understand the combination of water, electricity, fire, and fumes. Several questions for you, which I'm going to bring in. First of all, your level of showing the height of the development for the batteries. It says 21 metres, I think it said. Do we have possibility of going back to the first slide so I can ask what's going on? Is that okay, Chair? Thank you. It's the height of the batteries and the level. I think it's third slide. Thank you for bearing with me. That one. Right. We're going to look at some detail on this because I want to know exactly where is the sea level, the land level, and also the fact is where in proportion to the land ratio we're talking about to see exactly how high we're talking about within distance from land and sea. The reason why I'm asking for this question, there is also recognised a floodplain problem with floodplain level 1, I believe it is, and 2, which you've mentioned in the past. That's second question. Third question is the water tank for the runoff of the water, should the fire service need to require to have it run off. With it being in a floodplain department, does this system have a non-return valve? Also the subject to weather permitting, which we've had some pretty bad storms recently. Would that fill up automatically with water, or is it completely remained empty at all times in the event of fire? Secondary on top of this, you said a question which was the fact that the protection wall might be safe. I don't like the word might. I like the word absolutely guaranteed, and I don't see it. Also the fact that you said about a no-gate entrance. Security, that is a major concern for me. Who's monitoring the site? Who can come in and out? And what is going on regarding the security of it? Therefore, my concerns are very valid here because I don't seem to consider this to be safe for the environment and the area. So my concerns are, could you please explain to me what backup would be in place to protect these in order? Thank you, Chair. And my return. Oh, sorry, my apologies.
Thank you. I'll try and answer the questions as best I can on this one. We've got the plan up here showing the levels. My understanding is that they are AOD levels there on the left-hand side of the key. You got above ordnance data, 39 meters. The equipment itself on there, you've got the 4 meter acoustic barrier. Most of the equipment in there is about 3.5 meters in height. So you're not talking about a raised, a high raised platform there. A sea level reference, yeah. I don't think we've got a sea level reference there. I suppose thinking constructively about how that could be added to a condition to require. Sometimes you get the finished floor levels on there for the avoidance of doubt. That could be proposed. Okay, I've just taken note of that. The second question I think was about flood risk, and I'll just stop sharing if that's all right. So yeah, members can then see the presentation as we go, our discussion as we go. The site is within flood zone. The site of the BES compound is within flood zone 1. The only parts of the site affected by flooding are a bit of the access road, which has surface water flooding, medium and high risk on there. So that's 1 in 30, 1 in 100-year risk. Otherwise, the site itself is in flood zone 1, which is the lowest level of flooding there. Our flood risk management team don't have an objection in flooding grounds. A non-return valve, I apologise. I don't know whether there is a non-return valve in there. Our flood risk management team have looked through the detail, the drainage scheme in detail, and they might know that answer, but I don't know the answer today. The tank, my understanding is that it would be empty. It would only be used for fire water storage within the site. The protection wall, I take your comment on there about it being safe and effective. I'm not sure of the question there, but there is a condition that requires that the detail of that fire safety wall, and the applicant has in their note you provided a bit more specification on it. But I think that ought to come in as a planning condition, and the council consult the fire and rescue service when it does come in. There's a question about the gates as well. I think I may have said there's a condition on no gates, and what I meant was that there's a condition on no gates opening outward. That's a condition by the Highways Authority, just to make sure that a gate doesn't swing out into the highway, and then that's a highway safety issue. So it's up at the main gate on Cold Harbour there. And I don't think I've answered all your questions, so please come. Yeah, if you can remind me of those latter ones or any other ones, then I'll do my best to answer.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the return answers. My concerns was the no access points and gates. Yeah, I understand that the gates swinging out, but the meaning of it is that the security system is what I'm after as well as in place. Coming back to your question of the water retention, the container is empty, or is it full? Is it being used as a resource to quench the flames or disaster? And the fact is that it's still not giving me the confidence. The fact is that this system of runoff is containing the pollution which with this would give massively if there was a fire. On top of that, which I'm sorry I'm going to add into a question onto this, Chair, is the fact that the fumes from this would be highly toxic, incredibly dangerous. The wind speeds are quite high in that area, So you talk about pollution hitting anybody within minutes or possibly seconds because it's that fast. So my concern is that runoff, fire safety, security, water retention, fire, dousing, etc., this to me is not an efficient system and has been deemed by the speakers here, all three, the fact is that there's been tests done and this is not effective and has been deemed ineffective. So we need to be proven here today to show that it is a totally safe going forward. Thank you, Chair.
So it's really important at this stage that we're in technical questions, and I wasn't sure, although I think we get the gist of what your question would have been. So I think the thrust of it, I would suggest to the officer, is that a self-contained runoff point? I presume it is. I think it did say in the report that this would be an empty tank to take fire suppression water from the tanks on the, I'm going to call it the north of the site because to me it's north on my page. But if you could just clear that up, I think that would answer some questions for Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, it's the underground tank is designed to take 300,000 litres of water, which is all 5 tanks plus a bit more. My understanding is an empty tank. There's this toggle back valve in there which would be engaged so that it would allow fire water in the event of a fire, that the water would go through into that storage tank. Apologise, I don't know all the ins and outs of this. I'm relying as an officer on the expertise of colleagues and consultees as well. The Environment Agency has looked at this in detail. They have proposed the conditions there, which have been worked up in consultation with our engineer in the flood risk management team. They're the experts on this, and they've recommended those conditions as an acceptable way to deal with contamination on the site.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Your question.
Therefore, Chair, can I speak to the expert, the designer? Can you answer this question, please? Okay. Can I put it to the presentation? I need to know this answer because we're looking at a tank which is either filling up, filled, to be filled, or has a valve. We don't have the answers here. I'm sorry, we don't.
Officer, are you able to give any further explanation to that? As I understand it, all the health and safety requirements are going to be conditioned and will be examined before an extant permission.
Yeah, that's right. They are conditioned there. I'm just thinking how we can provide further kind of justification for those conditions, and I can see if we've got our flood risk management team if they're available, but they may not be, just to kind of explain this in a bit further, in a bit more detail. Yeah.
Matthew, something I can do to help you at this point is I can adjourn the meeting so that you can speak with the applicant if there's anything you think would be gained in clarity at that point. Would that be helpful? It would. Yeah. So, Councillor Taylor, can I ask you at this point just to be really clear what you would like to ask, and I will adjourn for 5 minutes so that we can seek clarity from the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to you, sir, is the fact is that I want to know exactly what this tank is doing. You're saying it's for runoff. Does it have a safety valve, runoff valve? That means engaged when the fire service needs it to be engaged to collect the runoff from the tanks when they are using it for firefighting or dousing or whatever. That's the question. Is the tank empty, or is it being filled with water as runoff in natural environments and therefore cannot be containing the polluted water in the event of a disaster or fire? That's my question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. Are you prepared for me to adjourn the meeting at this point? Okay, can we adjourn for 5 minutes, please? Okay, welcome back, officers. Have you been able to establish the detail that you need? Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we tried to speak with our flood risk management team, unable to get a hold of them, but we have gone back to the flood risk, the drainage statement with the application, and also reviewed the report as well. So I think I said that it wouldn't include runoff. It would include runoff when the toggle back valve is activated. So if there was a fire and it was raining at the same time, surface water or water within that contained area would go into the tank within the site, the 30,000 litre, 300,000 litre tank within the site. The valve, the details of that, there's a toggle back valve, and the details would be secured under planning condition 18, part one of that condition talks about the pollution methods used in case of a fire, such as how and when valves will be closed off to ensure firewater is stored on site, and ensuring that there is sufficient capacity within the system is needed. So that is the first part of that pollution control condition. You've then got subsequent parts of that which talk about containing the surface water within the site and verifying that the site has been remediated sufficiently within the site. So I'm hoping that answers most of the questions there.
Thank you very much. David.
Well, thank you for clarification on that. The fact that the container would only be used in event of the runoff, I believe. That's what you're actually stating, is it? Okay. Do we have conditions? I'm sorry, this may be an additional, if that's okay, Chair, can I ask? Yeah, supplementary question would be, subject to the tank being used for polluted water, what is the procedure for dealing with the polluted water after? That would be my concern.
That is set out in the report in condition 18, parts 2 and 3. That's already been addressed.
So I have a question from Councillor Coombs-Verwood.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Matthew, can I ask you to go back to your presentation? And you had a slide fairly early on, which was an aerial photograph of the site, where you had this site ringed, but you had the surrounding site marked out. Thank you. That is the one I was referring to. Can you, with the pointer, show me the access from Cold Harbour Lane, please? Okay. So the area that is surrounded in red is the other application that we gave consent for. So the access to this site will go through an existing beer storage development. I didn't see any reference to this in the report because that then, in my mind, adds extra concern about access and safety and fire. If you have your one access point through an existing storage unit, if there's a fire on that area, how do you then access this site? Because we only have one access.
Yeah, they would both use the same access from here, and this access also serves the agricultural plots and paddocks in this area as well, so it's not just the two BESs. That access was acceptable for the Statira BES development, and it's also judged to be acceptable for this development as well. During construction, that's when you'd get most vehicle movements. Once a development is operational, there'd be very kind of infrequent visits to a site, so the access is considered to be suitable. If there were a fire on both BESs at the same time, that might be a very unlikely incident to happen, but there would be passing places. There are passing places to the development we're talking about today, and within the Statira development, I'll just maybe flip on to the next slide. Yeah, there I think there's a point here of access which is quite close to Cold Harbour Road, which then would allow access into the Statira development. So that allows kind of multiple ways in and around that site.
I'm just disappointed that that wasn't alluded to in the report. It's one of the sort of gap analyses that I tend to look for. The other concern that I had was, are they the same operator now for the two sites, or are they different? And where the other application is mentioned in the report, it's quoted with the application number 2023-02446, which is the application number for this previous application for this site, not the other site.
Apologies, where was that reference on the previous application?
It's section 7, planning history, and it's paragraph 7.4 on page 52. To the west of the site, a planning application for a 400 megawatt BES was submitted in August 23. Committee resolved to grant, blah, 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 blah. Underneath in italics, 2023-02446. And yet on the planning permission for this site, the previous planning application reference is 2023-02446.
Yeah, apologies. That's an error that should refer to PFUL 2023-04657, which is the East Chickford Court Farm reference number, but the description of development is accurate there. The other question was about whether the operators are the same or different. They're different applicants. Ultimately, planning permission runs with the land, and they could end up being the same operator, but at the moment they're expected to be different operators of the two BES developments.
Thank you. That answers my questions. I might come back in the debate.
Thank you. Matt, can I just seek clarification on one point from Councillor Coombs? The access road from Cold Harbour is described as running through the existing BES site, but actually, with regards to battery energy storage, it's actually only on one side. I think landscaping is on the other side, so it's not quite the same as running between battery packs on both sides of the road, as I saw that.
Thank you for letting me come back, Chairman. I think that my point is it should have been in the report.
Councillor Craig Monks, Bedminster.
Thank you, Chair. Indeed, I am Councillor Craig Monks from Bedminster. My question follows on from the previous point made around fire safety. I think I know the answer to this, but when this application was going through its process and obviously consulting with those various bodies, and the risks were assessed to be acceptable or not, how much consideration is given to what will be there in the future, or is it seen as purely on this own application?
So we have in the report considered other live applications as well. The development to the east of Chickfrill, which is, could put residential within 400 metres of the site. That's been considered. It is slightly further than what's there at the moment, with the Grafton Avenue being 350 metres from it. If there were to be a local plan at a significantly advanced stage, then we might look at proposed allocations in there. But what we've had to go on at the moment is live planning applications, which may introduce more more sensitive developments nearby, and that's the main one, the development east of Chickfrill.
The reason I asked the question is, I guess I wonder whether we're satisfied that the potential of risk of fire on this site, bearing in mind the other development storage facility, will actually be adequate. And I'm not an expert compared to fire safety officers that comment on the access point, but I did spend 16 years driving blue lights, and I am astonished that they're happy with a single entrance point. Absolutely astonished at that. That is worrying to me, but I'll take that to debate. But I guess my follow-up would be, are we happy that we can say that as best as we can, bearing in mind the access point is driving through another site, that is going to be safe? Because if both go up, I think we're talking the whole of Dorset and surrounding responding to that, and then it feels like we're in another level. I just wonder how much consideration we need to give to that. Thank you.
Councillor Spencer-Flower Verwood.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I don't need to introduce myself, do I? My question is around toxic fumes. I've heard that mentioned this morning. So my two questions are, in the event of a fire, are the fumes toxic? If they are, what's the impact on human life? Those are the two questions, and I'll come back to other things during the debate. Thank you.
From a BES fire, there are fumes given off by fire, and my understanding is they're generally very harmful. Could be a risk to life, very close to a BES fire.
Councillor Northam, please, which is Upway and Broadway near Weymouth.
So a couple of questions, really. One relates, so there's condition 8 and condition 20, which are the proposed conditions. One says, the condition 20, which is the emergency response plan, says that it should be in place before any development commences. And condition 8, which is the safety management plan, says it should be in before any BES installation takes place. To my mind, I ask, why are they different? I'll come to that a follow-up in the debate. Secondly, I'd like to point out in the report that the nearest occupation is likely to be the development proposed in the local plan, which is land west of Southhill, which is 100 metres away. And I think it's a little bit, dismissive to say this is not going to happen. It's in the proposed local plan. It's been there for a long while, and with the pressures on lack of land, it's likely to remain there, and it's actually needed for Weymouth and the area in general. So I think we should be talking about that 100 metres distance. I don't think it materially affects the argument, but I think it should be more accurately stated. Thank you.
So your question?
My question is, can they change the report to say that bit? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. In terms of we can't change the report, but I can clarify about that potential development to the west of Southland. I think it is noted in the report. It is about 100 metres from the site, the BES site, which again is well within the the distances set out in the NFCC guidance of 25 metres. But the local plan is at a very early stage. It's not a kind of firm, solid allocation which is coming forward. The two conditions there, the question was about why there is a difference in the trigger points, and I'm just looking at condition 20, which is about the emergency response plan. That is before commencement of development. Condition 8, the battery safety management plan, and that is before installation of the battery storage units. And I think, yeah, the reason why that was before installation was because, well, we wanted to know the details before installation on that one. If that is something that could be amended to be prior to commencement as well, with the applicant's agreement. Pre-commencement conditions need to be agreed with them. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm happy with the answer to both questions, and we'll come back to the question that was answered second later. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any other technical questions? Yes, go ahead.
Councillor Richard Crabb, Sherborne West Ward. Thank you for your presentations and your contributions so far. I've got a number of questions. The first one is about security. I haven't seen anything really that completely satisfies me as regards security. For example, is there CCTV? How high are the fences? And what measures are taken to ensure proper guarding is in process at all times? That's the first question. The second one is, what risk assessments have been completed and by whom? Are Dorset Council responsible, or have you put those all into conditions? Would you like to answer those two questions now? Because I've got two more.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, in terms of physical security, there is the fence around the whole BES perimeter, which is 4 metres. And then within that, you've got further fences around the 2 transformers in the southwest of the site. I think that's just a palisade fence, and around the customer substation. There are cameras around the perimeter of the site. They are thermal imaging cameras. My understanding is that they are for monitoring the BES containers rather than intruders into the site. But I can't confirm whether they would, or they could also be used for intruders as well. The second one is about a risk assessment. We haven't got a risk assessment on this development, and in terms of responsibility, if something were to go wrong, I'd be speculating if I was to talk about that. It would depend on what happened at the time, but you'd imagine it would be the BES operator, and yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we would like to see some risk assessments in reality. Now, is StatX, would you consider that StatX is the main fire protection method to, if you like, eliminate 95, 98% possibility of all fires, so that if that does not work, then we use the old and trusted, or maybe not trusted, method of using water to douse it? That's one. The next one is, given that the greatest risk with battery storage is thermal runaway, the site needs appropriate management at all times. I'm not sure how we condition that or how it is ensured, but by having somebody identify the battery is about to hit thermal runaway, they can knock it offline and avoid any incidents. That's what I'm meaning. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the StatX system, that compressed gas, is one of the ways to try and stop a BES getting to the thermal runaway situation. Once a thermal runaway has taken hold, it's very difficult to stop that. And the traditional method of dousing water on it from the fire brigade's perspective, is more about containing the fire and letting it burn out, letting the lithium burn out all the fuel within that. And it's about trying to stop it from spreading within the BES compounds. That's how the kind of water and the StatEx system work together. In terms of the management, in planning, we're trying to tie down those physical security systems and the BES battery safety management plan details. That's set out in the conditions, and I think that's probably as far as we can go in terms of the management of it. There's requirements that an operator would need to do for their own under other legislation on this site, which I'm not going to profess to knowing as a planner.
Thank you. Councillor Northam, Upwey and Broadway.
I would just like to speak when we move to debate.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm afraid you raised a rather difficult situation there with this regarding every profession I have been involved with, and we are involved with that through UK and other countries. Risk and safeguarding is paramount. Therefore, condition I would like to be brought in, and that's a question, please, Chair, a condition I would be brought in that the risk and safeguarding procedures are absolutely there in black and white. We do not move in any way in any industry unless we have risk and safeguarding in place. I'm absolutely appalled that it's not in here. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rideout, Gillingham.
Thank you, Chairman. Belinda Rideout, Gillingham Ward. Matthew, can I just ask, and hopefully you know the answer, the 5 water tanks on site, how are they filled? Are they filled from mains water? Because there's nothing, I don't think there's anything in the report, and should, God forbid, something happen, how are they refilled? Also, thank you for the links in your report. They were very useful to see how some of the suppression system works. Thank you for that. The StatEx, but that doesn't negate the need for the fire service to arrive with their fire engines. And I note that the FRS said there's potential from contaminated water runoff. Could you possibly go back to your slides and show me the area, the impermeable area around the containers, please? Thank you. Just the reason being, I want to be assured that any water or splashes of water, contaminated water, is collected within that area and then transported to the holding tank. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just needing to leave the meeting and rejoin it online to get this slide up. But thank you for your question. Please bear with me a moment. Just on the other questions, how the tanks would be filled and refilled, there's a condition there. There hasn't been any pushback from the applicant about it. I don't know exactly how those tanks would be filled and refilled, but there'd be a way to do that. On the site, you would expect it would be through transportation of water by vehicle to those tanks. Just to clarify the links as well, they were from the applicant in their briefing note. I haven't included them in my presentation. I have picked them up in the update sheet though. This slide with the impermeable area. Okay, hopefully we can see that. It's the area in red there, that is the concrete platform. And you can see, you've got the quads, the BES containers themselves, and you've got the transformers, which are within that concrete impermeable area. Ooh.
Thank you. if there's a lot of water involved, litres of water, it's going to splash around all over the place. Can we be assured that that is going to be contained and taken to the tank and it's not going to contaminate, especially if the, I mean, it's going to be toxic. Thank you.
I think as far as the Environment Agency are happy about how that's been arranged and the kind of level of that impermeable area, that they're happy with that layout. If there were to be some other contamination within the site, that would need to be dealt with as well under separate legislation, and yeah, that kind of falls outside of the scope of this planning application.
So I'm going to come back to Councillor Taylor now, but I just want to give some guidance before we move forward. So we have statutory consultees who give expert advice to this report. It's not really the job of this committee to design a fire safety programme for this. We do rely on the expert advice, and I think we should just be mindful that the recommendations from those organisations are that they are satisfied. This application does come with onerous and responsible conditions, and I think members need, without personal expert witness, we need to be mindful of those reports. David Taylor, Charminster St Mary's.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it reverts back to my very first question of containment of the water coming off of the polluted water going to the container, and has been eloquently portrayed by my colleague, Councillor Rideout. The fact is that steam is not contained, and therefore if water is poured onto a burning fire of such high magnitude in temperature, this is not contained. So steam is water, water evaporates, falls, and is not contained within the site. That is my question, Chair, because I do not believe it is being contained.
Do you wish to come back on that point?
I think in any kind of fire situation, there would be pollution that occurs from that, and it's mostly kind of atmospheric through the kind of burning of whatever structure it might be. So you're right that not everything would be contained within the fire and within the site, and I don't know how that would be controlled, or whether it could be controlled.
Thank you, Councillor Northam.
With regard to your advice to us, I think we are straying in places beyond that advice. I think we're speculating on the nature of the fire and what the water is being used for. My understanding, having read the material, is that the water is only used to prevent the spread of the fire to the other BES units. We've already heard that when a BES unit, that the system is designed to prevent the BES catching fire by preventing the thermal runaway. If that fails, there's a gas suppression system. And if that fails, you stop the fire spreading to the other units. You're not trying to put out the fire with water. So some of what's being stated, I think, is a misunderstanding, either on my part or on somebody else's part. I just worry there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Northam. Would it be helpful to move to debate at this point? Councillor Coombs.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a little observation before I say what I was intending to say. We have granted applications already in Dorset, and this conversation that we've just been having did not feature with, how can I put it, such concern on those other applications. So I just wonder what's different, but that's a rhetorical question. I don't expect an answer to that one. I've listened to all the arguments and questions around the technical side of it. And I do believe that the applicant has overcome most of the objections from the previous application. However, for me, there is still one outstanding issue, and it's that single point of access of Cold Harbour Lane. We talked previously about requiring 2 accesses. Maybe it's a misunderstanding about what we meant, but in my view, it's 2 accesses off Cold Harbour Lane, not bring it down and then split it into 2 accesses to the site. So for my part, I will not be supporting this application for that reason.
If I remember from the previous application that we considered, we were satisfied with the single point of entry from Cold Harbour and then the 2 accesses onto the actual site. So in a rhetorical way, I would also ask what's changed. Councillor Monks.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep my submission short because I know we've spoken at length so far, but it's just to agree with my colleague. For me personally, I do note that the applicant has made attempts to improve the plan, and I do take on board that we have to consider what's in front of us today. But I do think from my technical questions that there are concerns that I would have around the question of safety being met. And from my personal experiences, I share the same concerns with regards to access. I think we need 2 clear defined access points because I could go into scenarios as to why or what could happen with that 1 access point. But whatever the scenario is, if that access point is blocked, then there is everything else topples. So from a security, a fire, all the kind of what ifs, to me, that is an absolute necessity. So I would support the refusal on pretty much the same grounds as before. And potentially, if guidance allows to add some further concerns around the added risk to the wider site in the sense of the new application that has been granted, and unfortunately some depth of debate was missing there, but that's all I'm going to say on this matter. I think my position's clear. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for listening to all of the observation concerns I've made. I still stand by my question, even though my learned friend seems to think that the water will knock it out. The issues of pollution, water containment, safeguarding gas, this leads to a very important health issue, safety issue, and I still stand that this could be a huge concern. Moving on from the application that we heard 2 years ago, times have changed. We now know that the situations have changed dramatically regarding the safeguard of these systems in place, and these are not in place. So therefore, I will not be supporting this application. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just ask of the officer whether, having already resolved the previous development and satisfied ourselves with 1 point of entry off of the Cold Harbour Road, then splitting into 2, how secure we would be in making a different decision on this application?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was the same committee. It wasn't pre-elections, it was post-elections. So it's this committee approved the Statera application as shown by Matt on the screen earlier with that 1 point of access from Cold Harbour, and that was considered to be acceptable. So I have major concerns here that if we were to refuse this as a committee on the basis of that 1 point of access, an appeal and potentially costs at appeal. I think as well, I believe that you've considered 2 other BES applications presented by a colleague D, and I believe those only had 1 access in from the road as well, and they were both approved. And while each application is on its own merits, particularly with this one, given that Statera is the adjacent site using the same access, I think there's some clear comparisons that could be drawn at appeal.
Thank you. That was my concern. Councillor Rideout.
Thank you, Chairman. Belinda Rideout, Gillingham Ward. I've read the report thoroughly. I've listened to everything, and we have had other applications come before this committee, so we are knowledgeable of this. But the public and councillors were absolutely right to question everything because this could affect the public. But as I said, I've listened to everything, I can see from the report that the applicant has made significant changes for safety and safety to the wider public. I know technology is changing all the time, and we already have this, this suppression system that's been that will be installed if this is proposed. So on balance, I see a great improvement in this application. I can see they've done the very best to try and keep it as safe as possible. The FRS are broadly in agreement with it. They're the people that are going to have to put the fire out. So if they're happy, I think I'm happy, and I would be happy to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer-Flower.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm going to disagree with my colleague in front of me because I've listened to all the arguments, and thank you very much on all sides of the argument around the technical issues here. There's an inherent risk in this. And I think any committee making a decision of this nature is a huge leap of faith. There isn't a long history of this type of installation, and I'm not going to be influenced by previous decisions, because not necessarily on this particular one, but previous decisions elsewhere, because times move on. People begin to understand some of the risks, inherent risks in this type of technology, and it's before us today to make a judgment. And I've used this statement before, and you will know this, Chairman. If I'm being asked to make a judgment, I will make a judgment based on what I see before me. And what I see before me, I don't believe the risks that we're being asked to take outweigh the benefits that are likely to come from such an installation. Bearing in mind, this is an intensification. We've already got an application approved very close to this. This is an intensification of the same technology in the same location. So I'm not going to support this today, I'm sorry.
So can I just be clear, if we are to vote contrary to the officer recommendation, then we will need to have some material planning considerations in that objection. Councillor Northam, did you wish to speak?
We seem to be debating rather than asking technical questions. Have we moved to debate? In that case, I'd like to add a slight counter to what's been said. I think there is a really important document which we don't have in front of us. That really important document, there are two of them. There's the safety management plan, and there is the emergency recovery thing. Both those are planned to be produced later and would need to be produced later and are a condition on the development proceeding. What we're doing at this stage is approving the planning permission with the information available at the time or not. There is still, the whole point of conditions, there are still conditions that follow. And that safety management plan will explain and set out the logic of how to suppress the fire and how to deal with the fire as being the principal risk that we've all discussed. And I can understand people's concern in that area. I have been involved as a professional engineer in writing safety management plans, and I know how critical these documents are. So my question to the council is, it says that this will be approved. I really would like us to be ensuring that when we approve that safety management plan, that we seek professional advice on approving that safety management plan. And that, to my mind, applies to all the previous BES applications that we've approved, because they all come down to this concern, similar concern. I think we've already approved, I'm not sure of the number, 3 or 4 BES which have had similar concerns around the fire risk as well as the access. And I think to judge differently on this occasion, when we have this condition, this very strong condition coming in place, that before development these two things should happen, I think that is our safeguard. So on that basis, I would be happy to support this submission. Thank you.
So if I can give some further guidance at this point, it wouldn't be appropriate in this committee to take a view that we're not going to approve any further BES applications in Dorset, that we as a committee we would be predetermined then against BES developments, and that's not a position we can hold. So we have before us an application which we can approve, or we can refuse, or if members feel that there's additional information that they would like, then I am able to defer this application subsequent to receiving additional information that would satisfy members. Councillor Monks.
Sorry, excuse me, Chair. Just a question of clarity on your statement, and perhaps a colleague to your right can assist. I fully appreciate your comments with regards to a predetermination on BES sites in Dorset. But I think some colleagues obviously have a level of concern because of the fire risks associated with this site next immediately to another BES site. And I think we can't, I certainly am struggling to consider both outside of your advice. So I'm not against BES sites in Dorset. I'm pro green technology, but I can't help but have an eye on lots of BES sites on top of each other. And I think that is a relevant consideration within an application, whichever one it may be. But I'm happy for you or your colleague to clarify or tell me that I'm wrong on that.
So I think when we've looked at previous applications and this one, I think the scenario of fire risk is usually talked about in terms of one particular container and it not spreading beyond that. I think the apocalyptic concept of this entire BES site application going up and then spreading to an additional, bear in mind you've got the landscaping in between, is actually beyond lottery statistics. But yeah, that's just my opinion as you have an opinion sat there. Yeah, of course. Pass to my chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've kept quiet so far. I do apologise, Tony. I did see your hand go up, but I tried to nudge him and he didn't quite. Yeah, I've listened to the debate. I'm quite familiar with process control systems. It's something I actually did professionally before I became a councillor, or while I was a councillor, actually. My only concern on this one is similar to, I'm not so concerned about the fire. The gas suppression systems, the battery monitoring systems give early warnings now, whereas before when we were considering these applications, we didn't have that information and we didn't have the gas suppression systems that we have now. So I'm feeling slightly more comfortable with the fire issues. I'm happy with the fact that the tank is there to take all of the water runoff when it's contaminated. I believe that can be then pumped out and taken off site and treated properly. I'm concerned about the plume, as most people would, because we don't know where that's going to end up. But my only real concern is the access, again, one road in, which splits in two. However, my brain is telling me we've already considered this in a previous application, and we approved that application. So if I'm comfortable with the process, as best one can be, and let's face it, we are all still learning, and we've had some very learned people talk this morning. From a planning point of view, my only concern now is the access road, and I don't feel that's strong enough for me to say no to this application. So I will be supporting a proposal to accept the officer's recommendation, which is obviously contrary to what other members in the room are saying, but we do have an individual right to vote and our own personal opinion, and I am minded to, we haven't finished debating yet, but I am minded to support this if there is a proposal to support. Thank you.
Councillor Coombs.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Coombs, Verwood Ward. I understand what's been said, but I'll go right back to what I said when I first asked questions. The omission of the impact of the approved site adjacent has not been taken into account in looking at the access in this report. Now, I do understand there is a precedent over the access being the same. However, there is nothing in the report that assesses that access with the development adjacent to it. The access was deemed acceptable for the development adjacent, that's fine. And the access for this site was not deemed acceptable in the previous application. I'm concerned about the impact of the two. So there is no seconder at the moment for approval. So I will move deferral on the access point so that we have, make sure that that work is done to assess whether or not there is a risk, because that was one of the main reasons for refusal on the previous application. I hope I have a seconder.
Thank you. Councillor Northam.
Thank you. I understand those concerns. That concern about the access would be part of the recovery plan under condition 20, which would have to look at how the access to the site is gained, and that would have to consider all the potential other uses. There are other uses of that trackway. There are multiple occupants of the site, multiple renters of the site. It's not just all under one occupancy, and that service road services a number of different people. And so that access has to be considered as part of that condition, condition 20. And if the other application has reached sufficient maturity, then it would be a material consideration. Thank you. Yes, that we modify condition 20 to be clear that it should cover other uses of that access road.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to say that obviously the Fire and Rescue Service were consulted on the Stratera application with a single access, no consult on this application. It's the same individuals as well within the Fire and Rescue Service that have commented on both of them. So they are well aware of both proposals and the fact they're using the same access and they're in close proximity, and the Fire Service has raised no objection in terms of that fire brigade access, if that helps members at all.
Thank you. Craig.
Thank you, Chair. I know I said I wasn't going to speak again, but I felt compelled to do so. I am happy to second the proposal of deferral, because I think that this does need to be looked at, but I want to give the application the opportunity to bring a full picture, because I appreciate the officer's comments with regards to the fire officer that's reviewed both individual cases, but that's not we don't have that information. That's not necessarily within the report. So if the fire officer comes back and says, if somebody drives a lorry into the entrance and blows it up, we can still get in. At the moment, they can't. That's the reality. If there was, and we're talking, serious incidents, but if there was a terrorist attack, you block the gate and you blow up a vehicle, and that stuff happens. And I know this is Chickerell, but I quite like Chickerell, and I wouldn't like to see that happen. I know it's an extreme, but that's the sorts of things we're looking at. That's why you have two separate points. So I'm going to row back from being in a position of refusal, but I'm happy to second the deferral so we can have the fullest picture to make that informed decision. And hopefully colleagues might support that.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, did you want to have an intervention before we test that vote?
Certainly, Chair. The fact is that I still feel as though we've got to remember, I know this is a present case, but past cases is of different veneer of what we're talking to today, completely different. We haven't looked at the safeguarding issues, the conditions of practice, the safety regarding pollution, all sorts of matters which have been brought in today. I am still going to refuse this because I do not like the idea of this going forward without the safeguarding attitude being 100% in protection for the public of the area. That's my concern, and I will be refusing.
So, Councillor Taylor, if we do move to defer, have you just stated predetermination for a next meeting?
No, I'll wait for that condition to come through before I decide.
Thank you. Yes, Tony has a proposal, seconded by Councillor Monks. So the proposal is that we defer this item. I think the sticking point for most members is access. And if we could ask the officer to seek further clarification on that or an amendment to access to satisfy members. I think if I'm not putting words in Tony and Craig's mouth, they would like to see an additional entrance off of the Cold Harbour Road down to that site. I think that would satisfy members. How possible that is or not, I don't know, but I think that's what members are looking for. So if we can test that at vote with a simple show of hands, those in favour of deferral. Thank you. And those against? Sorry? Okay. So as chair with casting vote, I think I'm going to go with the status quo. There is no bed site there at the moment, so I'm going to move for deferral because I want members to have as much information as they can and be as satisfied with the site. So this item, P full 2024-04447, is deferred. Democratic Services, do we have any urgent items? Do we have any exempt business? No. So look, we've reached a point today where we couldn't all agree, but I thank you for your respectful and robust debate. That is what we're here for. I thank members for the members of staff, officers for the comprehensive report that we've received, for Lara Altree, who was our legal help in the first item, Philip Cryther for legal support in the second, and members of the public and councillor for coming and making their representation to this committee. Thank you very much. The meeting is closed at 12:33.